Durham against Somerset. Now it's a change of sport. It's time to go to Monaco. It's practice one and it's 5 Live Formula One.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and we have some amazing action hopefully for you this weekend. It's the 70th running of the Monaco Grand Prix when it comes to the F1 World Championship, and we're excited because this is not just a one-man show. This is not the Max Verstappen show anymore, potentially. We have 3 teams all competing to be the top, and this weekend they'll be pushed to the absolute limit. I'm Jenny Gow. In the commentary box we have our lead commentator Harry Benjamin. Harry, are you excited? This is your first Monaco when it comes to F1.
It is. I'm so excited. The grandstands are filling up nicely. We've got a really good position up in the commentary box. We're just right at the back of the grandstand on the exit of the swimming pool chicane, looking out at the pit lane. It's quite a unique pit lane in Monaco because there's just no room. There are 3 stories. You've got the garages, then you have the engineers who sit across the 2 levels, split at the top with a bit of hospitality as well. So no traditional pit wall here in Monaco, but I'm loving it. I love being on the boats. Had the chance to go on a yacht. That was very delightful. Rather enjoyed that.
Funnily enough, that was your highlight, was it? Going on a yacht so far?
So far.
Okay, well, hopefully we've got more highlights to come. As you say, I love this place. It's so quirky. I get to get really up close with the drivers and the garages because they're so tiny and they have to tippy-toe out and then go into the fast lane to go out into the actual Monte Carlo circuits. Mark Priestley, former F1 mechanic, is with us as well this weekend. And Mark, what's it like to be a mechanic at this race? Because I imagine it's slightly different challenges than any other.
Yeah, it is. Hi Jenny, hi everybody. It is tricky. It's tricky for everybody working in this place. It's an amazing event, a very special place, but there just isn't the space that Formula One really needs to operate, or at least would like to have to operate, and that's the same for the team. So the garages are smaller, even though when I first started coming here back in the early 2000s, a garage like the ones that we have today would be an absolute luxury. We had little sheds made out of concrete that you could barely even fit a full car in. So I don't want to moan too much about what we've got today because it is cool. It is tight and cramped, but everybody's now very used to dealing with it, and I think we've got a great weekend ahead.
And it's such an iconic circuit. We know and we love it, don't we? All of the names come out as the cars go through Casino and all that. I mean, the smell down here in the pit lane is immense. I mean, it's fumey.
It's one of those rare old school circuits where we do still use names for every corner. It's not turn 1, turn 2. They've all got, iconic names that have, come through the history of this sport for a very, very long time. And that's what I love about it. The circuit hasn't changed in a long time, forever, in fact, since it was first introduced all those years ago. And I think although Formula One cars have got bigger, the challenge for overtaking is definitely real. It also puts a huge amount of pressure on teams and drivers, and we get to see them at their absolute best, maybe on Saturday in qualifying, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, Andrew Benson is also alongside the commentary team, the F1 correspondent. Andrew, you've been coming here for years, but I think this year it feels a bit special because so many people could put it on pole.
Well, at least 4, Jenny, I think, probably, yeah. And what's interesting, actually, from our commentary position, we've probably got the best view in the house because we've got the best crash spot on the entire circuit, just to our right. That's the exit of the swimming pool complex, the second swimming pool chicane, as it's known. Lots of drivers, if they get the entry to the swimming pool wrong, they'll often clip the inside barrier on the right-hander and get catapulted into the barrier in front of the brasserie to something or other. I can't read the rest of the name of that restaurant. But that's just below us. But yes, it is close. I would say Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen's teammate at Red Bull's not really been on his game for the last couple of races. Can't count anybody out, especially if they're driving a Red Bull. But really, it looks like a race at the moment before anyone's hit the track, between Verstappen, the two McLaren drivers, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, and the Ferrari drivers, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Charles Leclerc, particularly, is a Monaco specialist. He was born here, he grew up here, he used to watch the race from his friend's balcony, which overlooks the circuit, and he was on pole here 2 years running in 21 and 22. So he's got to be considered a real contender as well.
Tell you what, the cars are lined up at the exit to the pit lane because there is some weather around and there is a rumour that they think it will rain either towards the end of this session or after this one before FP2. So we're going to see a lot of running, so the engineers have told me. So I'll hand over to our commentary team. Our lead commentator is Harry Benjamin.
Thank you very much, Jenny Gow. And we are just about set then for the first bit of track action of the weekend. And Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes wants to be the first out on the track as the green light comes on at the end of the pit lane. He heads on out, followed by the Haas driver of Kevin Magnussen, and they all stream out. And for those who wish to do a sync up for this first FP1 in Monaco, it's 59 minutes and 38 seconds remaining of the session in what is the jewel in the crown that is the Formula One calendar. Mark, it seems that everybody loves Monaco up until the Saturday. We get an amazing qualifying session, and then come Sunday, it is still, well, I think it was Nelson Piquet who described it best, like riding a bicycle around your living room.
It's a wonderful analogy, isn't it? and it couldn't be truer, really. Even more so today, but it has always been the case. These cars are now very big. The circuit hasn't evolved at all over time. So the Formula One in its modern era, to some extent, has outgrown this particular circuit. But I always like to look at this slightly differently. We've got 24 races on a very long calendar now. I don't want them to all be the same. So I like the fact that we've got different challenges at different events. And this one, let's hear from Oscar Piastri.
There is now a slight chance of light rain towards the end of this session. We don't think that's the big storm coming yet necessarily, but could be light rain towards the end of the session.
There you go, just backing up what Jenny said there. Potential rain on the way. I don't mind the fact that the challenge here really is all about qualifying. It's about getting that one lap under massive pressure when you are literally millimetres away from walls. You can't afford to hit them. You've got to build up gradually throughout the weekend towards that and then deliver it on a Saturday, and that can go a long way to determining your chances on a Sunday.
It certainly can, but we're still a little way from that yet. There is weather in the air, as you just heard on Oscar Piastri's radio race control, saying there is a 40% chance of rain during this session. Of course, we'll have FP2 as well today from 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can hear that on the BBC Sport website and later on. But cars heading out on track then, and it is an iconic circuit. I know that word gets bandied about left, right and centre, but especially off the back of Imola, where it was corner names, not numbers. We get that again where you head down towards Termon of Sandoval, up through Beau Rivage, then through the left-hander of Massenet, Casino Square, then through Mirabeau, the hairpin, and just coming through down the Nouvelle chicane is that the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc makes his way through the left-hander, now approaches the swimming pool chicane, chucks it in left, then it's a quick right-hander before you stump on the brakes for the tight and twisty exit of the swimming pool, blasts past our commentary box into the tricky braking zone of Raskas, the right-hander. Pit lane entry then comes up on your right before he slows right down, gearing up for his first flying lap round the final corner of Anthony Nogues and down towards the start-finish straight, which isn't even really a straight. It's a slight kick before he heads back up again through Sandoval.
Yeah, it's crucially important, of course, around here to make sure that on a lap, particularly in qualifying, but that's what they're preparing for here, of course, is to get space on circuit. That's why he was slowing down through Anthony Nogues, that final corner. He's just trying to build a gap so that he doesn't run across other cars once he's flying. You need to have an uninterrupted, very clear run around this circuit where your concentration is, absolutely at its peak. You can't be distracted by having to avoid other cars. So the teams, particularly with their engineers and in communication with the drivers, have to be really accurate about positioning your car, getting out on track at the right time, and then it's really up to the driver to really deliver the excellence that it requires.
That is the thing, isn't it? Traffic management. I was talking to a couple of teams in the build-ups this weekend, especially during qualifying, and ideally you want a gap in front of you of 6 seconds or more. You'll be lucky if you can get around a 3-second gap in front of you, particularly in Q1 when all 20 cars are out on track. Leclerc makes his way through the exit of the swimming pool. Of course, that is where he crashed a few years ago in qualifying, having secured pole position back in 2021. And what a heartbreak weekend that was, where a drive shaft failure on the way to the grid on Sunday perhaps robbed him of his chance to fight for a home Grand Prix win. This is a home race for almost every driver, because pretty much all of them live here, but it really is a home race for Charles Leclerc, who is Monegasque and has had a impressive season so far, not finished outside the top 4 all year long. Ferrari sticking upgrades on, a big upgrade package as well last time out in Imola. Carlos Sainz obviously has been performing well. He's not finished outside the top 5 so far this year. And I suppose, Mark, when you compare that to Red Bull, where Perez had an off race last time, and consistency is his big issue, and that is why Red Bull are still waiting on whether they confirm him or not for another year. Seeing now that the field is tightening up, Ferrari with 2 drivers, McLaren with 2 drivers in the hunt, that feels like that's where the real jeopardy might come for Red Bull.
Yeah, you're right. It's consistency, and Red Bull have always had such a massive advantage. They've been able to kind of get away with the odd discrepancy from Sergio Perez, but that may not be the case any longer. And you can look at it and say, well, look, of course, Verstappen and Red Bull have got this huge advantage from the build-up that they've managed to attain in the first few races, but that will very quickly disappear if they're not getting 2 cars into good point scoring positions, when we've got the likes of McLaren and Ferrari who definitely can do that. So you're absolutely right, it's one to keep an eye on, and Red Bull will certainly be keeping an eye on it themselves.
Well, the sound you're hearing at the moment is Alex Albon making his way through the Nouvelle Chicane in his Williams. He's now just making through the fast middle sector of the swimming pool chicane. So for the first time in FP1, we can head down to the pits with Jenny Gow.
Thank you. This is the best part of my entire job when it come down.
Well, a couple of technical issues there. We'll come back to you, Jenny. Don't worry, drops of rain reported by the McLaren radio. So this is going to be crucial to get some early laps in, because even though it might not pummel it down, getting a banker lap in is crucial no matter what the session is around here. Lewis Hamilton just making his way down the start-finish straight now. Fastest lap time, by the way, is currently going to Max Verstappen. He is on the medium compound of tyre, though. Everybody else on the hard. Max Verstappen, a 1:15.6 ahead of Leclerc, 3/10 clear. As I say that, Lando Norris just pumps in the fastest time in a bespoke Senna tribute livery on the McLaren. Also the overalls and the entire team kit in Senna's iconic green, yellow and blue colours, as we remember 30 years since the sad passing of Ayrton Senna in Imola.
It's a really great look in that McLaren, isn't it?
FP1 underway then, and not too much action at the moment. Max Verstappen was fastest. He's just been pipped by Lando Norris, though, in these early stages. Rain is in the air and possibly coming down before the end of the session, but it's tight at the top now. Red Bull have some competition. Let's see if McLaren and Ferrari can hassle them this weekend. 52 minutes and 11. 10 seconds remaining, and the McLaren of Oscar Piastri has just gone fastest, 6/10 clear of his teammate Piastri on the medium compound of tyre, Norris on the hard. Pirelli bringing the softest tyres in the range this weekend, the hard, medium and the soft, C3, C4 and C5. As Charles Leclerc, the sound you can hear in the Scarlet Ferrari, brakes for the right-hander of Rascasse.
Yeah, this is a sort of unique weekend in terms of the way that the teams and the drivers have to approach it is completely different to a much more traditional racetrack. In FP1, you've seen everybody queuing up at the end of the pit lane, desperate to get out, and that is partly because there's rain on the way potentially, but also because they just need their drivers to get laps on the board. They fill them up with fuel. They're not talking about really low fuel runs at this stage. They just want to get the driver into the groove, and that means building the confidence as the session goes in every single lap. Just getting closer and closer to the walls around here. That's the way you get a good lap time, is brushing the walls at certain corners, and the only way you get to that point is by gradually attaining that confidence, knowing exactly what the car's going to do when you turn it in or when you hit the brakes. And you only find that out through feel of actually doing it. And so it really is a case of just gradually edging towards it, and as a result you're going to see lap times just tumble as the session keeps going, and even as the sessions throughout the weekend keep going, as people get more and more of that critical confidence.
And we've got support action here as well in the form of Formula 2, Formula 3 and the Porsche Super Cup, so there's a lot of track action in between the Formula 1. Nico Hülkenberg having to do a quick 360 donut after locking up the front right, going into turn one. Bit of runoff there though, so there is just enough space to do that.
I'll tell you what's interesting to me so far about this session is Max Verstappen. Normally at Monaco he'll come out and he'll just nail some really fast laps. quite a lot faster often, quite a lot closer to the limit more quickly than the other drivers, and that's not happening today. And I say that because in the context of yesterday, Verstappen was talking about this as a potentially difficult weekend for Red Bull. That's because, similar to Miami, similar to Imola, although the circuits are quite different, they require some similar characteristics of the cars. Red Bull is not good over bumps, it's not good over curbs. They have to raise the ride height too much. It takes it out of its perfect aerodynamic window. So that's why they think they might be sort of more short of their optimum performance window, if you like, than their two main rivals. And at the moment, we've got Leclerc fastest, followed by the two McLarens, Piastri and Norris, Verstappen 3/10 behind. Now, it's not much, but it's a short lap, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything right now. I just thought it was interesting in all of that context.
No, it certainly is, and we saw that last weekend as well. Imola was quite bumpy too, and Sebastian Buemi, the simulator and reserve driver for Red Bull, having to put in a huge stint back in Milton Keynes to turn the pace around for Red Bull, and with a bit of Verstappen magic, he managed to, of course, set pole and take the win. But it was a tight fight. I wonder, Andrew, though, this stems back to Singapore last year as well, because even though they had a rough weekend, that felt like it was kind of it was a bogey track for them. It didn't show up massively on any other tracks last year with Max and Checo around the streets of Marina Bay Circuit.
Well, it didn't show up as much. I think that's the key thing. I don't think anybody really understands how Red Bull was so far off the pace for so long in Singapore last year. It seems like it was just almost a perfect storm of setup and circuit characteristics for them. But if you think back to last year, there were racetracks where they were less dominant than others, and this was one of them, actually. Verstappen took pole, but only with an absolutely spectacular lap, pipping Fernando Alonso in the very last seconds of the session, and Charles Leclerc was right in the game there as well. And it was very similar at Imola, wasn't it, last weekend? It was very nearly a McLaren 1-2, and it was only thanks to a tow from Nico Hülkenberg at the end of the session that Verstappen got that Red Bull onto pole. So it's a similar sort of thing. This Red Bull is obviously development of last year's car, but it seems to have similar sorts of characteristics. And Verstappen's been quite open about them. Actually, the other drivers are aware of it too, because Leclerc was saying yesterday, look, let's not get carried away by this McLaren revival or us being close to Red Bull. I'm a bit worried it might be circuit specific, and actually the next two circuits are also a bit sort of unusual, i.e. Monaco and Canada. But, I think Leclerc's a bit worried that when you get to the more conventional sorts of circuits like Austria, Silverstone, Hungary, and all the ones that follow on from that through the European summer, Red Bull might just stretch their legs, and all this will become a mirage, a sort of will-o'-the-wisp sort of thing. Sorry, Mark, you were about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, don't forget last year there wasn't really much of a challenge from behind, and Red Bull were actually able to sort of move away from development of their current car and put a lot of resource into the current car that we're seeing today. So the next year's iteration. This year, with a bit of, let's hear from Gasly.
Okay, Pierre, unfortunately we need a box car this lap. We've got an issue.
Okay,
what issue? We've got a PU issue that we need to investigate.
That's the last thing you want to hear on the radio from either from team or driver. So a power unit, PU issue, potentially at Alpine. We'll keep an eye on that one, but that's Gasly coming back into the pits. What I was going to say was Max Verstappen and Red Bull weren't really pushed last year, so we didn't see much in the way of development on that particular car. They were able to focus on this one. This year, they have got a bit of a challenge now appearing from behind, and it may just push them into a zone where they have to start developing more. They have to start learning more, doing things like we saw last weekend, these excessive sort of simulator and virtual world pushes back at factory to bring performance, and you might well find there's still a lot of potential in that Red Bull that we haven't unlocked yet.
Well, Max Verstappen has gone fastest in the last couple of minutes now with a 1:13.9. Nip and tuck, less than a tenth between himself and Charles Leclerc. Then it's Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris, the top 5. Stroll, Hamilton, Russell, Magnussen, Tsunoda are the top 10. And in 11th is Perez in front of Alonso, Albon, Bottas, Hülkenberg, Sargent, the top 16. Ricciardo, Ocon, Zhou and Gasly, who you heard on the radio a moment ago, now in the pits, having to go and investigate a power unit issue. We also heard on the radio a little while ago from Kevin Magnussen saying he needed to change his seat, Mark. Why would that be the case so early on in this session?
It'll just be that he's obviously feeling something. They're so attuned to the way these cars feel. The seats are literally moulded around the shape of their body. They are a perfect snug fit. So if there's anything that's not quite right, whether it's not sat correctly or squarely inside the chassis, he'll feel it. Only by a few millimetres, but he'll feel it. So these first few laps, it's very bumpy around here. He can't be continuing without having the most comfort he's able to achieve with that. So a quick visit to the pits, and hopefully they'll find something obvious and it'll be fixed quickly.
Tell you what, Piastri, just last lap around, was pushing that McLaren in these early stages, running ragged in the Senna liveried Tribute McLaren. Third fastest at the moment. Actually, he's just been pipped down to fourth because Yuki Tsunoda has gone up to third fastest. Max Verstappen now quickest of anybody. Charles Leclerc, though, finding time on this lap. Norris has just come into third spot as well. But good lap from Tsunoda, actually. Just over 3 tenths of Max Verstappen in these early stages on the medium compound tyre. And you have to say, Yuki Tsunoda has been performing well in the last few races.
He has. I mean, I think we have to say on Tsunoda and RB, as they're known now, the former AlphaTauri team, they do sort of flatter to deceive a little bit in practice sessions, it seems. They sort of quite often pop up second, third, fourth when they're more likely to qualify 7th, 8th, 9th, but still 7th, as he was in Imola last weekend, I believe, if I remember correctly, all those 5 days ago or whatever it was.
It's a long time in Formula One.
Yeah, exactly. It's a long time for me. There's still an impressive performance from them, even if they don't seem to be able to carry that through into the races quite so well.
Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo yesterday was saying that the team were disappointed in the debrief, but they still came away with a point-scoring finish. They beat their direct rivals. Yes, Lance Stroll managed to get through, but they beat Haas and scored a point. So considering that, they're challenging themselves. They're in a good position. Yuki Tsunoda, in particular, scoring points in the last 3 races, if you include the Miami Sprint as well. The yellow flag coming out for the Sauber of Valtteri Bottas, who's just run deep going into Saint Devant, but he's already back on track and making his way uphill, so no harm done there for the Sauber man. Also, the RB's looking to focus on their start procedures this weekend as well, after having tough starts in Imola. Here's Gasly.
Okay, no power.
Okay, let's box Pierre, box.
So Pierre Gasly then still struggling out there, having been called into the pits with suspected PU issue, sent out to investigate, still persisting there for Alpine.
There is absolutely nothing between the top 3 at the moment. I mean, literally nothing. They have got almost identical times, which is quite incredible when you think about how short the circuit is, but also how driver-specific, as everything we were just talking about, getting a driver into that groove and into the zone, how much influence the driver can have over lap time. And those top 3 cars, that's Max Verstappen's Red Bull, plus the 2 Ferraris, Leclerc and then Sainz. Absolutely nothing in it at this stage. So if we stay this close as the sessions roll on, we're in for a treat.
42 minutes and 17, 16, 15 seconds remain. As you said, Mark, it's Verstappen ahead of Leclerc, Sainz, Piastri. Norris is 5th in front of Tsunoda, Stroll, Albon, Hamilton, Magnussen, the top 10. Ricciardo's actually just got 10th as Lando Norris makes his way through the exit of the swimming pool chicane. Little bit of a twitch on the front end of that McLaren, coming in to the right-hander. On the podium here for Lando Norris back in 2021, and he goes to the top of the times on the hard tyre, a 1:13.9, less than half a tenth ahead of Max Verstappen.
I tell you, he's not doing very well at the moment, Harry, and that's Fernando Alonso. He admitted it himself yesterday, he'd not driven very well in Miami and Imola. Those are his words, not mine. And he was effectively saying he'd got a bit frustrated. The car wasn't doing what he or the team wanted, and he kind of, especially last weekend in Imola, he kind of turned it into a kind of, I say that, he's just popped up to 7th ahead of his teammate Lance Stroll. I'll stop talking now, shall I? I'll just finish my Alonso story. He was basically saying that the car wasn't doing what they wanted in Imola last weekend, so he sort of turned it into a test weekend. It was partly his own doing, because he stacked it in P3, which is not normal Alonso behaviour, but he stacked it because he was trying to make it do things it wasn't wanting to do. So only then did they turn it into a test weekend, to be fair. He was saying, though, he was quite optimistic about this weekend. That optimism is not being carried over so far. He's 9th fastest at the moment in the Aston Martin. They are going through a bit of a sort of navel-gazing period, trying to work out, I should say, what exactly has gone wrong. How can they be qualifying 3rd in China 2 races ago and 15th in Imola?
Well, finished 19th in Imola. That's the first time he's finished as low as 19th. It was classified 19th in Mexico back in 2022, but he had DNF'd. He still was classified on that occasion. I wonder, do you think, Andrew, as Leclerc just seeing a little look at a replay coming out of the exit of the swimming pool chicane, big swap on the front end, has to cut across the chicane, saves it, doesn't hit the wall, carries on, but a bit of a scary moment there from Charles Leclerc. Also saw Max Verstappen not too long ago on his way to setting what was then the fastest lap, touching the inside wall at the swimming pool. So no inch spared. I wonder, Andrew, on Alonso and Aston Martin, obviously he's committed to Aston Martin until through to 2026 when the new power unit regulations come in. With the nature of the driver market right now and the fluidity of it, do you think there's an argument to say, has Alonso pulled the trigger too soon?
There is definitely an argument to say that, and I know that I know from talking to people close to him, he's not that happy at the moment about the way things are going. Because obviously when he signed, which was sort of basically between Australia and China, they were qualifying top 6 at every race. Fourth, like he got, as I say, a third in China, he was 6th in one race, 5th in another, 4th in another. You've got your stats right in front of you, Harry. Mine, I'm just relying on my head for mine.
No, you're doing well.
And but then suddenly they dropped off, and it was almost a precipitous drop. And I think it was the question that prompted that admission about his driving yesterday was me asking him how much does he think it was a loss of performance from the car and how much of it was circumstance, i.e. you messing up, I meant, and he knew what I meant. He basically said, well, we have added performance to the car, we just haven't added as much as everybody else, basically. And I think here's Russell's radio.
Not biting at all.
Russell complaining about grip, and not surprised, he's down in 16th place at the moment. So yeah, it's definitely a question of why they've not made the progress they think, and a lot of people now are beginning to ask in the pit lane. You've got two teams who are not making the progress they wanted. One is Mercedes, one is Aston Martin. And what's the common denominator between those two teams, apart from the fact that they use the same engine, gearbox and rear suspension? They both developed their cars in the same Mercedes wind tunnel, yes.
Yeah, that question is increasingly being asked around the paddock, isn't it? We know Aston Martin, with this state-of-the-art facility that they've built in Silverstone, are developing and building their own wind tunnel, not quite yet fully ready for action, so I think they'll be hoping they can move on to that sooner rather than later. Speak of Mercedes, this is the sound of George Russell you heard a moment ago on the radio, just making his way through the Nouvelle chicane into the left-hander of Tabac. Has to ease off the throttle. He's not on a quick lap on the medium compound of tyre. He is currently down in 16th spot. Teammate Lewis Hamilton just heading out now on an out lap on the hard compound of tyre as well is 14th. So Mercedes in the early stages lagging a little bit behind as Russell slows right down on the exit anti-nose, gearing up for his first, well, for a flyer. The drag reduction system, the DRS, activated down that main straight. The rear wing flap flies open and then slams shut immediately as you apply the brakes as he heads off uphill through Sandoval.
It's a tricky one. You heard George Russell talking about getting no grip from the tyres, and almost certainly it's going to be to do with tyre temperature. It's a tricky place to generate it because it's also relatively slow speed. There are a lot of tight corners, of course, so you can throw the car into those, but you're doing it generally at slow speed, and particularly when you have to go through preparation laps trying to create this gap where you're often backing off and holding back and literally rolling around sections just to create that important gap for you. Your tyre temperature can easily drop away, and once it does, there is literally no grip.
Well, just getting out of the way, the Red Bull doing a brilliant job breaking into exit of the swimming pool chicane to allow Yuki Tsunoda, who is on a flyer, through Raskas, uphill braking through the right-hander of Anthony Noakes, and then foot to the floor all the way to the line for Tsunoda, who was third fastest, make that second fastest, a 1:13.6 on the medium tyre. Tsunoda, who hasn't scored points in Monaco in his visit so far, a best of 15th place in that rain-affected race last year where Fernando Alonso could have nearly won his first Grand Prix for Aston Martin. It didn't quite happen in the end, but it put us all on the edge of our seats. No rain forecast yet for Sunday, but Saturday qualifying could well turn into a mixed condition race.
Let's see if we know Ocon.
The front is it's bouncing in the air quite a bit mid-corner.
Bouncing in the air.
They had similar, but Alpine had quite a lot of bouncing issues in Imola as well. So I think the Alpine is again another car that gets quite affected by bumps.
It's one of the tricky situations, particularly with this era of Formula One car. You need a really stiff car to maintain your aero balance. That means you need a really stable platform underneath the car. You want to keep it flat as you can. You want to minimise the sort of pitch and the roll, because that sort of flat underfloor with the Venturi underneath there, that's what's giving you a huge amount of your downforce, which you need around here. But also, you need it to be quite soft to be able to deal with those bumps. And the stiffer you go, you hit these bumps and the curbs, and the car will literally leave the ground. It will bounce, it will jump up, and at that point you have minimal grip and it's slightly out of your control. So that's always the challenge from an engineering point of view. It's finding that compromise between keeping a stiff and stable aero platform but being compliant enough to deal with the lumps and bumps of a street circuit.
I spoke quite a lot to team principal Bruno Faman of Alpine last time in Imola, and he said they made a bit of a step back throughout the weekend. Both cars made it through into Q2, but they weren't too happy with where they were. Alpine currently 8th in the Constructors' Championship, just ahead of Williams and Sauber, who've yet to get off the mark. Alpine only with 1 point to their name. And I want to bring this up for discussion because there was all this talk about Andretti joining the Formula One grid, perhaps buying an existing team that might be struggling, aka Alpine. That seems to have drifted away a bit. But Andrew, in the build-up to this weekend, Pat Simmons has obviously gone. Pat Simmons, that one. Got it right the first time. Has gone and left his role as F1 technical officer and been hired by Andretti as they push to get on the Formula One grids. That to me seems like a really interesting move, if not slightly hypocritical.
Well, it's a bit odd for a start because he's left Formula One, which he didn't. To be fair, he didn't actually have a job really anymore. Pat Simmons was brought into Formula One back in 2017 by Ross Brawn, when Ross Brawn was the managing director, to basically work on these new regulations that they introduced in 2022. If you like or don't like these current regulations, then you can blame Ross Brawn and Pat Simmons. But now the F1 technical department, as it was, has basically been transferred to the FIA, and so Simmons was kind of like a lone wolf in F1. He was kind of there to keep an eye on the rules for Stefano Domenicali, the F1 chairman, and make sure that the FIA didn't go too AWOL with them. But those rules are more or less written yet. They're not published. They're due to be published by the end of June. So he didn't really have a great deal to do. I don't know why he's gone to Andretti. It seems an odd choice to join a Formula 1 team that doesn't exist. Well, the team exists, but it hasn't got an entry, and it's not got any prospect of having an entry. And yes, Harry's just done the universal sign for money and the commentary box.
Oh, you've called me out there, Ben.
That is something that someone else mentioned to me this morning. It must be to do with money. In fact, the quote was, I won't attribute the quote, but it's probably gone there for 18 months to tidy trouser a load of money and then retire. But anyway, the Andretti story continues to be controversial. There was a press release email sent out this week about some altercation between Mario Andretti, the sort of father figure of Michael Andretti's team, and also the legendary iconic figure in the Andretti family when it comes to motorsport, and Greg Maffei, the head of Liberty Media at the Miami Grand Prix, which, depending on who you believe, has either been misrepresented or not. Here's some radio.
The car's on a knife edge.
Certainly is on a knife edge for Max Verstappen, who's been scraping the side of the walls and the barriers around this track on the exit of Saint-Devote, coming through the swimming pool chicane as well, not leaving an inch.
And whether that conversation's been represented accurately by one side or another, the essence of it seems to be basically that there's still a lot of distrust between Formula One and the Andrettis. Formula One hasn't appreciated generally the way Michael Andretti has handled his attempt to enter Formula One. They feel he's been a bit abrasive. He's gone about it the wrong way. He's won a load of enemies rather than trying to win friends. I think that was the message that Greg Maffei, as I understand it, was trying to get across to Mario Andretti. Mario Andretti took it quite personally, as he would, because it was effectively about his son's behaviour. But the point is, they're still trying to get an entry. They've been rejected for 2026. Someone's left the door open for 2028. There's some 6 senators, perhaps not surprisingly, from the Midwestern states where the US car manufacturers are centered. And one of the US car manufacturers, obviously General Motors, is linked to the Andretti bid. They're pushing US Congress for an antitrust investigation into Formula One on the basis of rejecting Andretti. Don't know whether that's going to go anywhere, but obviously that's not going to help relations either, because Formula One feels that it's coming from General Motors at Michael Andretti's behest. Meanwhile, lots of people think, why make it difficult for yourselves? Why not just buy another team? There are a couple of obvious candidates looking at it from the outside. The problem is that neither of them, and they are Alpine and Haas, want to sell. Gene Haas has apparently said he'll die owning a Formula One team, and those are his words reported to me, not directly from him, but someone said that he'd said that to them. And Alpine, who are basically a Renault team, Luca Di Maio, the boss of Renault, sees that as a branding exercise for Alpine, the brand that they've revived as a sporting sort of aspect of Renault. He's not interested in selling it either. You might think, Mark and Harry, that the Alpine branding exercise isn't really working because the team's a load of rubbish, but Di Maio doesn't see it that way.
I can think that Formula One fans will be sitting at home thinking, why on earth don't Formula One just let Andretti in? Why can't we have this 11th team, a team that seems to be well funded? They are acting like a Formula One team. They've built a factory. They've just employed a technical director. They seem to be going about things in a way that seems like it would add to Formula One. So why don't Formula One just say, yeah, in you come, guys?
It's a good question. And just before I answer it, I was going to point out that things are looking a bit brighter for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton on the medium tyres has gone second fastest, splitting Leclerc and Verstappen. But to go back to that issue, basically the way Formula One was set up under the current regulations, the Concord Agreement, I should say, which is the sort of tripartite agreement that binds the teams to Formula One to the FIA, to simplify the situation, but that's what everybody calls it. It was set up for 10 teams. The prize money structure's around 10 teams. Everything's around 10 teams, including even the infrastructure at some of the circuits, like this one, for example. And that's one of the arguments that people are putting forward, is there's actually physically, literally no room for Andretti at some circuits. Obviously, they'd find a way if there was an 11th team. But it makes it complicated because there are structures in place to admit other teams. You have to pay a $200 million anti-dilution bond, it's called, and that's basically to compensate the other teams for the loss of prize money that they would sustain if an 11th team came in and started earning prize money. The other teams, quite legitimately from their point of view, Harry thought Oscar Piastri was going to crash out of Anthony Node, but he didn't.
No, he didn't. It gave me a scare, though.
The other teams, quite legitimately from a business point of view, is saying, well, we don't think $200 million is enough now for effectively an entry when most of the top teams are valued at $1 billion plus. So all this is going on, and also I think if you take a step back, while to the audience on an evocative level, an emotional level, it might seem appealing to have Andretti in. It's a big name. Mario Andretti's a legendary figure, as we said. It will be 2 more slots on the grid for 2 more drivers. What's wrong with that, people would say? Well, Formula One would say, well, that's fine, but what's actually the benefit? Is that actually a commercial benefit to the sport from having an extra team? And that's harder to prove.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think it's a discussion that will continue to run. I think you can argue from both sides, legitimately from both sides, and I'm sure people will. But right here, back in Monaco, it's still Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari who tops the timesheets, but ahead of Lewis Hamilton in that Mercedes. And it's the Ferraris have been running around on the hard tyres and putting in fast lap, but it's the Mercedes and the Red Bull of Max Verstappen running on the medium tyre behind them.
Checo could have got out of the way a lot earlier there.
That was Carlos Sainz on the radio as he comes down out of the hotel hairpin and towards the tunnel, raises an arm to Perez to indicate his frustration at the Mexican. Logan Sargent.
Front left. Steering straight, but I hit it way too hard for nothing to have happened.
That was coming through the left-hander as you approach Casino Square for Logan Sargent. He did absolutely touch it with his front left, still able to have the straight steering though, as he says. Sargent down in 15th at the moment. Soft tyre running though is occurring. Who's stuck on the softs? Yuki Tsunoda has. Oscar Piastri, so too has George Russell. Daniel Ricciardo and Fernando Alonso have all put on the red-walled rubber, the fastest rubber out there on track. So we'll see what they've got coming through in their first laps on the soft. Piastri currently 6th, and Tsunoda out there at the moment on his first lap, but I don't think he's really pushing. No, he's getting out of the way of the Red Bull, so we'll see what Tsunoda's got on his next lap around. George Russell, though, is coming through the first sector, 10th and a half up in over Leclerc on the soft tyre, as Ricciardo comes across the line on the softs. He goes 7th fastest.
This is a tyre that should deliver quite a dramatic leap in lap time if you can get it switched on. You really want the soft tyres around here. It's a lot of stop, start, slow corners, all about mechanical grip, much less reliance on aerodynamic grip, as you might see at a faster circuit. So this soft tyre that's going to give you that grippiness that you want is the ones the drivers will all love to get onto. It's the ones they'll be qualifying on, of course, when it really matters for that all-important grid slot. So these are the first laps where they get to explore that, find out how their car behaves on that beautiful red soft rubber. At the moment, Piastri has just gone top of the timesheet, but pipped by Russell, all on the soft tyre.
By 0.3 of a second, George Russell fastest from Piastri, Leclerc, Norris, Hamilton, the top 5. Hamilton on an outlap at the moment. Tsunoda's just been on the radio to ask the team to check the floor. He was on a fast lap initially on the soft tyre, so I wonder if he has had a little trouble out on track somewhere that we haven't yet seen. Also, you can tell I've been away for a week. I haven't done the standings updates. I should have done that right at the top of the program.
You haven't really been away, Harry. You've just been working for somebody else.
Yeah, well, I've been away from the radio land. I should just let you know, if you don't know, it's Max Verstappen who's at the top of the championship. 161 points to his name. 48 clear of now Charles Leclerc, who is up into second, ahead of Sergio Perez. Just 6 points between those two. Then it's Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz and Oscar Piastri, the top 6 in the Drivers'
Championship. Does Sky not need the championship standings then when you come and do it on telly?
Who? I don't know what you mean. It's all on the telly, mate. You can see it all with your eyes. On the constructor side of things, Red Bull are leading the way, 268 points, 56 clear of Ferrari, McLaren third, and honing in on Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, the top 5, RB leading the way in the second half of the field. Still clear of Haas, and then Alpine just with the 1 point to their name, Williams and Sauber, yet to get off the mark as Tsunoda puts in his first proper lap on the soft tyre to go third fastest, about 8/10 off Russell's tempo. So that was a decent lap by George Russell in the Mercedes, perhaps giving a little bit of hope for that team. And I suppose, Mark, what a circuit like Monaco does is it lessens the gap between the entire field, doesn't it?
It does. And I was talking to some of the guys at the Mercedes team this morning, and they were sort of saying exactly that. They know they've got some deficiencies from a sort of straight line speed and the high speed stuff. They know they can't compete with the likes of Red Bull, Ferrari or McLaren at the moment. When it comes to Monaco, it is very different. So it's a bit of a leveller in that regard. You still need a car that's able to deliver that grip around these slow corners. You've got to have a driver, more importantly, that's able and capable of pushing to those limits. And as we said earlier, building up to getting the confidence in the car. So if you can tailor your car, go for a setup that's all about slow speed here, you don't necessarily have to use the sort of compromises that you might have to factor in at other tracks where you need to balance that slow speed with high speed. This is solely about slow speed stuff.
McLaren's a fast hit. Piastri's just gone to the top, 1:12.1, a 10th clear of George Russell. Hamilton, another couple of tenths back, but he had a bit of a dodgy Nouvelle chicane where he clouted over the bump. So I wonder if there's a little bit more time in the bag for Hamilton. Alonso up to 4th, in front of Tsunoda, the top 5.
Just looking at McLaren, people at home might be thinking, how are McLaren fast around here, when actually one of their weaknesses has been the slow speed elements of most of the tracks we go to. But it's actually exactly what I was just saying, the other way round. At a normal racetrack, you have to compromise with your setup between high speed and slow speed. Here, they can actually set up the car purely for the slow speed, which, although it's been a weakness when you balance it with high speed stuff at normal circuits, here, if you can completely tailor the setup and get it built all around the slow speed nature of this track, you might be able to eliminate that weakness, and that's perhaps what we're seeing from McLaren.
Quite possibly. Well, 20 minutes and 48, 47, 46 minutes remain. Piastri, Russell, Hamilton, the top three. Alonso, Tsunoda, Leclerc, Norris, Magnussen, Stroll, Albon, the top 10. And a Verstappen who's still in the pits. Ricciardo, Sainz on an outlap now. Hulkenberg, Perez is 15th and on an outlap. Joe, Sargent, Bottas, Ocon and Gasly, the two Alpines. Gasly with power unit issues at the moment, confined to the garage, 20th and last. It's not been the ideal start for Alpine. Ocon also complaining of quite a bumpy ride in his Alpine, as Yuki Tsunoda has to thread the needle out on track in the RB in the final sector, negotiating his teammate Daniel Ricciardo and the traffic around him across the line for Tsunoda. Does find time though and goes up to 4th fastest, so Tsunoda enjoying the streets of Monaco and racing around the Principality in these early stages at a time where he needs to be making good headlines. The driver market is so fluid, Mark, isn't it? The big rumour this weekend, in the last day or so, is Carlos Sainz. Where might he go? Now there's rumour and talk ramping up about a potential move to Williams.
It's a fascinating time, I think, in Formula One generally. You know, we're not just talking about driver moves, we're talking about engineering moves, personnel changes, we're talking about a brand new set of regulations that are the biggest change that we've had in the history of this sport at one time. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and all of those things kind of factor into each other. If you're making a driver move right now, you're not just making it for next year, you're making it ahead of a really big change, a lot of which is unknown. The form book for 2026 is not necessarily going to carry over, so the teams that are quick now, when you get such a massive change of engine and chassis regulations, might go out of the window. So how do you pick as a driver as to where to go? And if Carlos Sainz is having conversations with Williams, which has been widely reported, it may well be that somebody like Williams is talking about how they're preparing ahead of those regulations. What can they potentially promise or offer ahead of time?
So for Sainz, he's in a slightly invidious position. You know, on the face of it, it looked like he was in a really strong position. You know, there were seats opening up potentially at Red Bull, at least one potentially, if not two. There's a seat at Mercedes potentially for next year, and then of course you've got all the teams at the back of the grid currently, including Sauber and Williams, and Sauber is going to become Audi, which obviously seems like on paper seems like a very attractive option. Now Audi are very keen on Sainz. They've offered him a lucrative multi-year contract, but from what I understand, Sainz, like many people in Formula One actually, they're not that convinced that Audi are going to be competitive anytime soon. Everybody recognises, first of all, how much work they need to do to get Sauber to be competitive. They're basically the slowest team on the grid this year. Secondly, Audi are brand new to Formula One, and while the VW Group has been successful in motorsport across the piste, you know, Le Mans, rallying, what have you, they're in championships where the strength of competition is nowhere near what it is in Formula One. They've never had a challenge like this before in motorsport, and not Formula One, you might accuse Formula One people of arrogance, but a lot of people think that maybe Audi don't realise quite how stiff that challenge is going to be.
So we have seen that before, haven't we?
Exactly,
Ford,
with manufacturers, Toyota, exactly. Yeah. Toyota's the example that everybody brings in. They had all the money in the world, but they never won a race. So people are asking the same questions about Audi. So while it looks on the face of it like going to Williams would be a massive step back, and of course it would be from Ferrari, actually, you know, if you believe in James Vowles' plans for Williams, and we have yet to see whether he actually can turn that team around or not, all we know at the moment is he's in a bit of a state while he's trying to do it, they will have a Mercedes engine next year. If Mercedes steal a march in the new engine regulations in 26, like they did in 2014, actually Williams could be a really good place to be. Look at what happened with Williams in 2014. They were like the second or third quickest team, largely because of the Mercedes engine. Yeah,
well, they've managed to convince Alex Albon to sign a multi-year contract, so he's heard and seen something that he likes. So could it be the same for Carlos Sainz? We shall see.
Oh, it's exciting, isn't it? Just as much as the on-track action. The off-track action is keeping us entertained, and what will happen to Adrian Newey as well? That is the other big question that everybody is talking about. Could well end up at Ferrari, but deals being done in the background as we speak, and at the moment no one quite aware of what exactly is happening. 16 minutes and 2-1 seconds remain of free practice 1, and everybody now either out there on the soft compounder tyre or out there on the medium, as Lewis Hamilton has just gone fastest on the soft tyre.
And we haven't said that for a very long time.
I know. Less than half a tenth of a second. Hamilton clear of Piastri, Russell, Norris, Leclerc. The top 5. Sainz is coming to the line now. Let's just see what he does. And he goes 9th fastest. Lost a bit of time in that final sector. We haven't heard from you for a bit of the session, Jenny. We had a few tech issues, but can we check in with you now?
I don't know if you can or not. Hopefully, yay! That is great news. And I've been lucky enough, despite the tech issues, to right at the chicane as the cars go towards Rascath and watching them swing there so close to the barriers. It's awesome to watch. Toto Wolff's been out here watching. I'm just next to Jos Verstappen, who's just watching his son go out. He's just left the pits on the medium tyres, so he'll be warming up and seeing what he can do. And to my left is Sir Jackie Stewart, so I'm amongst good company. However, the clouds are kind of ominously coming in from the left-hand side over the mountains, and I think everyone's looking up thinking, is there a chance of rain? There's a red flag out on track as well, Harry.
Yeah, red flag. We've just seen Zhou Guanyu clout the wall on the exit of Saint-Devote. Took a bit of the advertising hoarding with him, but he's carried on going. Here's Leclerc.
I took a carbon part under the floor.
Okay, we'll check the car.
But he has left a bit of debris on the track that has been collected by the sounds of things by Charles Leclerc. Zhou Guanyu did keep on going. In fact, there is no car that stopped on track. There's just debris, not only perhaps from the underside of the Sauber, but certainly from the barrier, and a bit of the advertising hoarding scattered onto the track. So red flag out then, and because it's practice, we still continue to count down the clock, as Charles Leclerc has made it back to the pits and gets wheeled into his garage while the team check for any damage sustained to the rear, to the underside of that Ferrari car.
I can tell you that having worked in the pits here as a mechanic many years ago, this is one of the most nerve-wracking sessions that you can watch as a member of the team, because it was Leclerc picking up the bits from Zhou Guanyu's car.
See the fluorescent green on the underside of the Ferrari.
So he carries that with him, I think, all the way back to his pits. Ferrari will have to go and re-deliver that back to the Sauber team. But going back to what it's like to be in the garage in these moments, because what you're relying on to get lap time, as I keep saying, is your driver to push closer and closer to the limits. And as the session ticks down, as we're getting now with 13 minutes left on the clock, you're now looking to your driver to be really in that zone, having built that confidence and scraping the barrier. It's not quite as hard as Zhou Guanyu just did it, but you're also watching that through sort of winced eyes when you're sitting in the garage, because you know that when a driver like Zhou steps across that limit and clips a wall, that immediately translates into quite a lot of work. Your lunch break's suddenly gone, but you're asking your driver to go there, but just be millimetres back from that limit, and that's a tough ask. It's all about accuracy and delivering ultimate precision under massive pressure. So it is a very strange situation to be in when you're sat in a garage here in Monaco.
And Mark, he looks like he's mostly got away with that. It's quite astonishing, really. He gave the barrier a real clout on the outside there at Saint-Devote, but it seems like he's only damaged the outside edge of his front wing, which I'm quite surprised about. The other one I was surprised about earlier, by the way, is Logan Sargent. He got lucky to get away with that. He hit the inside barrier at Massenet, which is one of the fastest corners on the track, and very often when you do that, you get catapulted out to the outside barrier and make a real mess of your car, as in fact in final practice in 2010 Fernando Alonso did in the Ferrari. And actually it's interesting that the two drivers who have come closest to crashing so far in this session are the two drivers who are arguably most under pressure. We've talked about Sargent's position a lot on 5 Live over the first few races of this season. He's got the biggest margin of deficit to his teammate in terms of performance on the grid so far. And guess who's got the second biggest margin of deficit to his teammate? Zhou Guanyu compared to Valtteri Bottas, who does actually give the impression of having stepped it up a bit this year. Zhou, by the way, OK, Sargent looks like he's going to lose his seat too at the end of the year. That seems almost certain. But Joe is also extremely in danger of losing that seat at Sauber, and there's not that many teams that are that interested in signing him, despite the size of his wallet.
Sargent at the moment down in 17th, Joe down in 19th in this FP1 session, which will get back going in a couple of moments' time. So, a few moments then to check in with Jenny down in the pits.
And I can tell you, it is starting to just spit with rain. I felt the slightest touch of water, looked around to the file marshal, she's saying, yep, that was rain, and she lives in Monaco, so she knows, and that cloud is getting even closer. So is this the end of the session going to be affected by rain?
He got in my way to back. It was really bad.
That was Logan just saying on the radio about Daniel Ricciardo getting in his way, coming through to back. So a bit of traffic there for Logan Sargent. Back to you, Jenny.
And just to update you on Pierre Gasly, they've had to investigate that car. They've got to rectify a wastegate issue. So it's likely that he will miss the whole of this session, but they'll work on it for FP2. But it does disrupt your flow, doesn't it, if you miss any of the running here? And the rain is getting a little bit heavier, by the way.
All right, thank you, Jen. Yeah. The thing is, you look out of our commentary box window, which overlooks the pit lane, or is right opposite the pit lane, as the green flag is back waving, green light at the end of the pit lane, so session back underway. We'll get 9.5 minutes of running, but you look slightly to the left and there's white whispery clouds, bit of blue sky, but then you look to the right hand side over the Monaco mountains and the hill range that surrounds the Principality, and there are some ominous grey clouds coming this way. They go over the circuit and then head out over the coast through and onto the horizon over the Mediterranean Sea, and we are right on the coast, the harbour just behind us, where the boats are bobbing.
They are. It changes very, very quickly here, doesn't it? And it can really, dramatically change the outcome of an important session like qualifying or even the race. I think we've had many races here at Monaco affected by rain, and it really does spice things up on a circuit that we know is difficult for overtaking. That can really throw a cat amongst the pigeons. So we will keep across it as the weekend unfolds, but at the moment, slight drops of rain, but nothing for anyone really to worry about yet.
Just coming back to Gasly, that is really difficult for him to basically be confined to the pit lane, because here, as Jenny alludes to, you want to build up a rhythm and build up confidence, don't you, for that all-important qualifying, because that will settle where you end up in the race.
Yeah.
He's been out-qualified 6 times so far this year by Esteban Ocon, and I think a lot of people coming into this year thought Gasly might well have the upper hand. Ocon has turned the wick up a bit, I think it's fair to say. He's on the lists now. We hear he's second choice perhaps at Audi if Carlos Sainz decides to say no to them. Haas are shopping around, potentially for a whole new lineup. We're hearing that Ocon is on their list as well. So to be confined and miss a whole practice session for Gasly is a real pain.
It's a massive blow, and it is. I don't want to keep overstressing this, but it's just so important, more important than anything the engineers can do in terms of tweaking setup, any settings on your steering wheel, any of those things that we normally refer to or turn to in these moments. Here it's all about getting on track, getting the number of laps in and building that confidence. So if you're missing the entirety of a session, that's a huge blow. Just to clarify what Jenny was reporting down there with the wastegate being the problem, for those who aren't familiar, that is part of the turbo unit. So one of the restricted elements of a Formula One power unit today. Gasly so far has taken 2 of those units throughout this season. We'll get to see whether that needs replacing or can be just fixed.
Over the bumps at the exit of the swimming pool chicane, that is the sound of Max Verstappen, who is just slowing right down, coming out of the right hand of Raskas, giving himself a little bit of margin to George Russell, who is the car ahead of him.
Haas is penalty for sure.
Yeah, saw that.
Getting a bit tight in the pit lane, a bit too tight for Yuki Tsunoda and RB's liking.
Well, he's referring to the fact that they're creeping out the pit lane. It's very busy, it's very tight down there, and the Haas just sort of rolled out in front of him. In many situations, you might well call that an unsafe release, but I think the stewards and the FIA do have to give a little bit of leniency around Monaco with things like this, because everything's a bit different. There just isn't the luxury of space that you normally get. So I'm not sure I'm not quite as convinced as Yuki was that will be a penalty. We shall see.
So, getting towards the end of free practice 1 then, and soft tyres and medium tyres, the order of the day at the moment. Fernando Alonso, currently Sigfast, is just making his way around the hairpin. What do we call the hairpin? It's had so many different names. Is it the hotel hairpin, or is it just the hairpin?
I still call it Lowe's. I don't care.
Yeah.
I just don't care. That's what it's going to be called forever, as far as I'm concerned. Everyone else, it's like I've no way. I was never, ever in my life going to call Parabolica Alboreto. I'm just not.
Yeah, that's
true,
a very good point.
It's such an iconic, corner, the tightest corner that we go to, and actually, we used to, back in the day, we used to have to design specific suspension for that corner to get extra lock out of the steering rack. We'd have little cutouts in the wishbone so the wheel would be able to turn even further. That's how tight it is. You can't really over-exaggerate it. Normally, you don't need that much lock on an F1 car, of course, because you're never going around anything like that. So you just design a car to what it's most used for. But here we did bring specific components. So it is very, very tight. It is iconic. And no one really knows what it's called.
So expect a mixture of Lowe's and hairpin.
I think technically it's called after the hotel that is
whatever
there,
the name of the hotel is.
It used to be
changing.
It was the station hairpin originally, but then the station moved, so that doesn't seem appropriate. But for a very, very long time, the hotel there was Loews, which was Lowe's. It isn't that now. Is it a Fairmont now, or is it something that's changed again?
It was Fairmont, but I think it's changed.
Plenty of luxury hotel brands are available, by the way, audience. So don't get distracted by all these names just because you hear them on the commentary. It's always been Lowe's for me.
And also, if you are in the market for buying a very premium hotel in Monaco and you want to pitch yourself to buy that one, just call it Lowe's.
A lot of people have fallen on with thank you for it. Perez has just been on the radio saying he's got a puncture. He's being wheeled back in to his garage now, so he's made it back into the pits.
He looks like he scraped the wall, because actually the outside of his tyres looks like they had a little bit of concrete dust, as if he's come a little bit too close. So maybe that's the reason he's got a puncture.
This is a big weekend for Perez. I feel like we have this conversation every few races, certainly last year. The consensus has been, up until Imola, that Sergio Perez has done okay job, nothing terribly eye-catching, but he hasn't been miles off the place compared to his teammate Max Verstappen. His contract is up at the end of the year.
What the
That was Esteban Ocon, who was behind one of the Red Bulls coming through Anthony Nogues. Ocon wanted to get a move on with the lap, but then nowhere to go because there was a Red Bull in front of him, and the Frenchman not too happy about that. So Imola was not a great weekend for Sergio Perez. It was over for him in qualifying. The race was always going to be a struggle from there, overtaking near on impossible in Imola. Come here, very much same order of the day, really. He's got to nail qualifying, but do you think there is pressure that this consistency word that gets bandied about over Perez and whether he'll get that contract extension seems to be one that's looming bigger and bigger?
Well, there is pressure on him because of that, because the Red Bull were very clear that when he came into the season that he had to be more of a support to Verstappen than he was last year. It's quite a stark statistic about last year. Verstappen won 19 races. Perez was behind him in second place only 4 times.
Yeah,
which is,
not enough.
Basically. And everything was going fine, as you said, for the first 4 races of this year, Harry. But he went way off the ball in Miami, and particularly Imola, and that's exactly what Red Bull don't want to see. The thing is, though, as I was saying on the podcast yesterday, it's almost like he's going to keep the seat by default, because there's going to be no one left to replace him with that Red Bull are interested in. Ricciardo's not performing. They're not interested in Tsunoda for whatever reason. Sainz doesn't look like he's going to go there. Without those guys, all the top names are already tied up in their own teams, apart from Sainz. In that case, it's kind of like, well, we've got to keep Perez, even if we don't really want to. It's kind of where it is.
Yeah. Could it be real left field option and they just stick a Liam Lawson in or something like that?
I think if you're going to stick a Liam Lawson in, you do put him into the RB and you move one of those guys up, and Tsunoda's making a reasonable case for that, but as Andrew says, he just doesn't seem to have favour. He doesn't seem like he's a preferred choice moving forward. He's not the replacement in terms of the long term at Red Bull, so they have got a slightly tricky choice on their hands.
But making his way now through the hairpin, or whatever you want to call it, is Lance Stroll just on a lap. Let's hear from Max Verstappen.
It's just the bumps. The car is so loose on the bumps. So any interaction with engine braking or brake bias is just making it all worse.
That's Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen on the radio, Jean-Pierre Lambiase replying to him. Car feeling very loose, especially over the bumps at the moment for Verstappen. So not too comfortable for the Dutchman. Both Red Bulls 11th and 12th at the moment. Getting into the closing stages now. Let's pop down to Jenny.
Yes, and Pierre Gasly has actually got out in that Alpine, so well done to the team for getting that power unit sorted. He's just going to do a sighted lap, I think.
Yeah, well, at least
too dramatic. Sorry. And Lance Stroll had it out. He's got loads of Flovis on the back of his car.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. So Gasly is out there on the hard compound tyre, or the actually it's the medium or the hard. I've got two different readings.
Medium it says
medium,
here, yeah.
I don't trust the other graphic I'm seeing. So he will get at least one lap just to check everything is working. And Aston Martin, well, they've got a revised rear wing and beam wing, but it's not really for performance. It's more circuit specific. But they have stuck a load of Flovis on the back of it anyway. Lance Stroll off the back of scoring points in Imola, his first since Australia a few rounds ago. So it was a good strategy call by Lance Stroll and the Aston Martin team. That brings out the checkered flag and the end of the first practice session. It's a traditional weekend in Monaco, so there'll be 3 practice sessions in total, with one a little later on, which you can hear on the BBC Sport website and online. We'll be on air 5 minutes to 4 this afternoon, but a couple of closing laps happening at the moment. Pierre Gasly on his one lap after being stuck and confined into the pits with power unit issues, just bedding in that Alpine before FP2.
Well, it's been a really good session for Mercedes, hasn't it? Lewis Hamilton tops the times, teammate George Russell in third, both McLarens in second and fourth, with Oscar and then Lando behind. So the teams that we wouldn't normally necessarily expect, particularly Mercedes, really having a good showing on the streets of Monaco, where the driver can really make a difference, and maybe that experience from Lewis Hamilton, he's won here of course in the past, maybe that experience showing through.
Yeah, Hamilton fastest, less than half a tenth of a second between himself and Oscar Piastri. Russell, Norris, Leclerc, Alonso, Stroll, Tsunoda, Ricciardo and Sainz. That is your top 10. Verstappen and Perez 11th and 12th, ahead of Bottas, Magnussen and Albon. Then it's Hülkenberg in 16th, in front of Sargent, Esteban Ocon, Zhou Guanyu, who had an excursion with the wall, and Pierre Gasly 20th and last. Jenny.
Thank you so much. So that's free practice 1 done. The drivers have got themselves out there and got their sighters and getting closer and closer to the walls each time. Some of them a little brush to the wall too far, but no major damage. Those clouds have seemed to drift off the surrounding of Monte Carlo and have gone over the sea. So the rain has stopped. It was only a light drizzle, didn't really affect anyone, but maybe there'll be more rain coming. And Mark, if there is rain between this practice session and the next one, that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, because it changes everything about how your car behaves, and you'll be getting into that session without really knowing what to do.
Yeah. Practice is done, and it's a good start to the weekend for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton ended up fastest, just ahead of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, while his Mercedes teammate George Russell was third in front of the other McLaren of Norris. The Ferrari of Charles Leclerc rounding out the top 5. The 2 Red Bulls, though, not quick out the block. Verstappen 11th, Perez 12th. It's looking tight at the top, though. FP2 later on this afternoon.
Well, a little update there for the BBC 5 Live. We will continue our coverage on BBC Sport website. You can join us at 3:55, so you can hear everything from FP2. There's plenty more running, but Hamilton fastest. Well, we haven't said that for a while, but it should be good. We need to go in for cricket, so thank you for all the team for their coverage, and we'll be back a bit later for FP2. Kevin, over to you.
And we're all happy that Jenny Gow is back in a happy place, aren't we? I add my long name to all those lists of people. Just great to hear Jenny back there in Monaco. Brilliant stuff. And more from Jenny and the team over on the website a little later on today. More on Extra over the weekend. It's a bank holiday weekend. It's crazy. Monaco and the bank holiday weekend. It just comes together all so well. And over on 5 Live as well. So that's all to come. But we've got cricket for you, or at least we will have. Jenny's done it great. She's handed it to me, and it's lunchtime. We haven't got any cricket, but we have got lots of scores to bring in. Also...